Hi guys, this is Kimberly here. Welcome back to my channel, the Send Me to Unite channel, and to part 2, which is really, I guess I should call the other one the introduction. So let's call this part 1. That was the introduction. This is part 1 of the information on the Awakening, Ascension, and especially about the shift, or the event. Some people call it the shift, some call it the event, and I've used both terms, that is coming up in a very short amount of time, and that is having everything to do with why you and I are on this channel, why we're talking today, why you're listening to me, and why I'm talking, and with all of the changes that are happening on our earth at this time. Not only is it demonstrating itself in politics and world events, but it's also demonstrating itself in physical changes on our planet, as well as other planets and things within our own galaxy that are being affected. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is that, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but 35 ancient teachings and traditions across the planet, across the globe, all talk about a 25,000-year cycle, which is actually the precession of the equinoxes. So I'm going to write those both up here. So we've shortened it to 25,000-year cycle. It's actually a little bit longer than that. And it's based on what's called the precession of the equinoxes. And we'll try to explain it briefly. It really basically takes place as our own solar system travels through basically in its cycle around the Milky Way galaxy. And I'm hoping I explained this right. I may not be quite exactly right, so actually look it up. But it has something to do with that, and there's a wobble within Earth's axis that ends up changing the exact degrees of where our North Pole points. That ends up, like, I don't know if you've known this, but like the pyramids in Giza at one time perfectly lined up with Orion's belt, and now they don't. But they will again eventually after 25,600 years. So this is as we're moving through our specific place in our own galaxy, we actually see we see those changes. This is also what is the ages of the zodiac, or they're a subset within that 25,000-year cycle, and we have 12 of those. Oh, actually, no, never mind. They are the same thing as, it's not a subset. So because each age of the zodiac is approximately 2,000 years, just a little over 2,000 years, and so there we get that. And then those ages start again. So these world religions that talk about this, we're talking about everything from Hinduism to Zoroastrianism to the Mayans, and I can't even name them all. There's so many. And again, I'm going to go back to the reference. My main reference, first of all, is with David Wilcock, but there are many references that he cites, and I have looked into a lot of those as well. So this cycle is the grand cycle that was actually talked about in the Mayan calendar, and it's why the Mayan calendar ended in 2012, and literally, approximately December 12, 2012. So, everybody was expecting this is, from other things they said as well, that this would be the end of the world. And one of the things that is important to understand is that this cycle ends up bringing us within our galaxy and ends up bringing us through certain physical points. And I'm not going to go into all of this, but it's super fascinating. It has everything to do with sacred geometry and how from the microcosm to the macrocosm level, every single thing in our entire universe, our world, our reality, everything is based on this sacred geometry. And that sacred geometry is you see it on a very small level, and then you see it again on a larger level, and that sacred geometry basically creates planes of let's say if we were here at the central sun of the galaxy, and here's our solar system, and it travels around, okay? So as we travel around, and it's not actually perfectly, we may travel in a perfect ellipsis or circle, but the actual zones that are created from the central sun of our galaxy have to do with sacred geometry, and they actually have edges and corners and things like that, because, it's something like squares inside of Merkabas, inside of, different kinds of shapes, and those shapes literally end up creating marker points around this as the energy is emanating from the central sun of the galaxy. Just as a super abbreviated version, so much better to like get into all the episodes and learn more about it more specifically if you're interested, but just to suffice it to say that when we come to certain points in that 25,000 year cycle where these different edges are, certain things are set to occur. And so there are cycles within the 25,000 year cycle. There's a 1260 year cycle, and there's more cycles and on. So these cycles are all based on sacred geometry, and all of that sacred geometry is being affected by the energy that's emanating from the central sun of our own galaxy. There's also a whole other layer, of course, because everything is connected. So our galaxy, of course, is moving around the entire universe, and it has its own path that it transverses and then eventually comes back to. And so there are much bigger cycles than just the 25,000 year cycle. And what is taking place right now in the end of this particular 25,000 year cycle is master grand cycles. There are actually 2 levels above this one that I won't go into, that are also lining up with the center of our universe. And because everything is like a fractal, everything is being created in fractal patterns. And so our entire universe is a fractalized version of our own galaxy, which is a fractalized version, which our sun is a fractalized, our own solar system is a fractalized version of the galaxy as well. So think of the fact that the center of our universe is another like central universe sun of this particular universe, and then there are other universes, many universes, multiverses that are doing the same thing on larger and larger scales. So, and I think from what I understand, it's actually infinite. So those, different energies are lining up to create these different cycles, and it all has to do with energy. So as we are hitting this period of time right now, let me explain to you just a little bit about what's going on, and then some of the proof for it in science. So this is super interesting. First of all, I'm going to go into what it's one of the major scientists who David Wilcock discovered, and from this point he began being able to build a theory that then was able to find so much more data out there, even though basically the science dogma, which is being governed by the theory of Darwin's theory of evolution, and higher than that is being governed by people who don't want us to know that this shift and this change is coming. Even though that dogma basically overshadows all of the scientific studies and things that are being done, there are still scientists out there who are collecting, finding, and seeing real live data points and writing about it, and basically in a small piece look at that and say, okay, here's what I discovered, here's the proof, and here's how I think it makes sense in the larger picture of things, and here's how it doesn't make sense. And basically, where it does make sense or it doesn't make sense, there is some really, really key pieces of information there that can then help us in, we plug it into a different theory of what's happening, and then it actually starts making a lot of sense. So one of the first scientists was a Russian scientist called Alexei Dmitriev. And he, in a nutshell, had he created a theory from the evidence that he was looking at that called vacuum domains, which were basically gravitational energy that is being transformed into electromagnetic energy or photons that then emerge in visible light in the form of a plasma ball, which is visible, especially in infrared. And that right there, that vacuum domains with the plasma, gravitational energy, basically just say that there's visible energy that is happening in certain places, which is this vacuum domain. Where those occur are on these corners and these edges where all of the sacred geometry lines up from especially on the macro scale. Again, that sacred geometry, it's a fractal pattern that the farther you go into it, all the way down to the cellular level, to the atomic level and deeper, ends up having that exact same pattern. And those patterns of that specific geometry actually dictate how energy travels and where it goes and where it emerges in a sense. Just again, we're just kind of trying to summarize it in the most basic terms. So Alexei Dmitriev's work and all of his information and this idea of vacuum domains really came forward as the big aha moment for David Wilcock, and this was back, I believe, in still the late 1990s. And from this particular concept, he started to create this unified, basically a theory that everything is connected, and that these corners of where these plasma balls, let's call them plasma balls of energy, exist, and it explains why they exist. They're emanating from the central sun of our own galaxy, and then they're also being heightened by another alignment of our central sun from the entire universe. And that energy is actually in a physical presence that our own solar system is entering right now. So now I'm going to go into, briefly, again, I am just giving you guys a really snappy overview of all this information. I can't recommend enough that you go, if you're interested in what I'm telling you, that you go read more about it or listen to more about it yourself. So what's happening right now is actually something that is very much present in the Russian scientists who have been studying this for a long time, and also in NASA. But it's very interesting that especially NASA, although this information is out there, there's a very concerted effort to keep it from being plugged into a theory of what's really happening, and also to just kind of even though they'll put it out there, it's not being reported by mainstream media. It's not being looked at in the whole climate change. Climate change is a really big, it's actually proof that this is happening, but instead they've pinned climate change on our Earth as being completely man-made. Now, I'm not saying that we are not polluting our planet. I know we're polluting our planet. I know that we're, this idea of burning fossil fuels for energy instead of harnessing the clean, free energy that's everywhere is ridiculous. One has to wonder why. Why is it that we were, now when technology ought to easily be able to figure out ways to harness and use free energy that literally exists everywhere, and we're not being told about it, that we're not being allowed to utilize it, that people who discover and make great inventions that could provide this energy for free are then completely shut down and even threatened. One has to wonder why, and there is definitely a reason, because this information, all of this information that ultimately has to do with the event and how it's going to change our world and change everybody in it, is being suppressed by this small group of people who've chosen the negative path, and who because they've chosen the negative path, it is in their credo to control and suppress, oppress, make slaves of, do everything they can to try to keep this information from getting out, because it truly is, light and darkness are at complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So that's where the whole global warming theory is not really, they're really taking all kinds of data and evidence, and then they're having to kind of twist it and change it in order for it to fit the story they're telling us, and instead, the actual proof of its existence or what's happening with it or why it's occurring is in a completely different theory that's being suppressed. So that the information, and this is something you can find if you can do some Google on it yourself. Google the word local fluff. It's such a silly name. So look up NASA and local fluff, and see what articles they have written about what this is. So basically, as of, I've got to look at my notes here about when this was first identified. Hold on, sorry. I knew who it was. Where is it? It's a woman scientist for NASA. Where did I put it in my notes? I can't. I'll look it up later maybe and put it in the, I better not, because I'll forget. Where's her name? I cannot find it. I know I wrote it last night. So there was a NASA scientist who was the first one to talk about local fluff. It was discovered by the space probe. There's actually two space probes that that we've sent out, at least that we've acknowledged sending out. Oh, here it is, Dr. Mirov Ofer. Actually, I don't know. This might be a Russian one. might be the Russian one because I think the Russians were the first ones to publicly talk about that. Sorry, my writing is a mess. And she is the one that announced that, well, here it does say, NASA admits in 2009, so this is 2009, so pretty recently, you guys, that's not that long ago. In 2009, NASA finally admits that we are entering a very highly magnetized and very hot cloud that they call local fluff. And this, they actually come out and say, physics, the laws of physics as we understand them, say that this should not exist. What they're saying here is that our theory of everything, which is, based a lot on Einstein, and not knocking him because he had a lot of good stuff that he understood, but that theory of everything that it's based on, and the theory of evolution as we have it, and all of our other scientific knowledge and data that they've plugged into their theories, they say that this local fluff should not exist. So let's just take a little picture here, and this is not really highly accurate, but here we are, a central sun of our galaxy, and here's our solar system that's entering it, and here it is, it's out here, this local fluff, which is a highly energized, hot, energetic, a magnetic cloud. And it actually has helium, a lot of helium gas. It probably has other things as well. So we're entering into it right now. And I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Okay, so by us entering into this, and when by very hot, we're talking 6,000 degrees centigrade, or Celsius, whatever that's called. 6,000 degrees, you guys. That is very hot. I mean, that's hot enough to like literally obliterate like our entire everything would just like go up in smoke and ashes if we were actually entering into that without the shield of the Earth's magnetosphere. We'll talk more about that later. So it's very highly magnetized, it's very hot, should not exist according to current models. This cloud has grown in strength and temperature since then. So this was reported in 2009 at 6,000 degrees. It's hotter even still. So in 2015, is when they come out and announce that they realized it's even, hotter, stronger, and more powerful than they had thought back then. So this is being discovered by IBEX. I don't know if you can see that. IBEX is the space probe. It's out here, this little space thing, it's out there. We're getting measurements from it, and it's given us all this information. And so it's already outside of our Earth's, magnetosphere. It's entering the local fluff itself. And there are actually a number of papers they did. There's 8 papers, I guess, total that they had all these measurements that was collected and from this interstellar flow of helium atoms. Now, during this same time, here's some other information that NASA has admitted is occurring in our solar system. Now, this is something, this cracks me up, you guys. Even though they'll publish this stuff, unless you're out there looking for it, you're not going to hear about it. You're not going to find it. You're not going to see it. You're not going to know. It's not being talked about in our schools. It's not being talked about anywhere. And all of this is happening. Okay, so from about 1940 onward, they have noticed incredible changes in the activity of our sun and its effect on planets within our galaxy. Now, as I talk about these changes, understand that as we're entering closer and closer to this local fluff, it's not like it's something that has super confined boundaries. Like, it has the most powerful part of it in the center, but there's perimeters and edges of it that exist, which don't exist in the blank places of this 25,000 year cycle. Think about this here. This 25,000 year cycle, basically what it means is that every 25,000 years, we enter this spot in our pathway around the central sun of our galaxy as our own solar system is moving around. We enter this spot of hot local fluff, or super hot gases, and it has an effect, and that effect is what we're going to be talking about. So 25,000 years, and we began, even though 2012 was the end of the Mayan calendar when like big shift would occur, the ascension, the event, that would time during the time frame of that. We started having an effect on our own solar system in about 1940. And here are some of the things that were noted during that time. So since 1940, we have more activity in the sun since 1940 till now than ever happened in the 1150 years combined. So for 1150, that's really interesting. That's really close to 1200, and 1200 is one of the other cycles. So for about 1200 years, we now have more sun activity in just the last 60, 75 years. In 75 years than we did in all of this time. So now let me tell you this. Here's what's interesting. And I just actually lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought on that, which is not good. So we're going to move on, and hopefully it'll pop back in. Okay, so more activity in the solar flares. This is like solar flares and those kinds of things. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So this activity, and this is something that David Wilcott goes into a lot more in his theory, that basically proves there is such a thing as quote-unquote ether, where everything is connected on an energetic level. It's kind of like it's behind the scenes. And because everything is connected, us entering as a solar system, entering this local fluff, this highly energized area, even though that energy is kind of streaming around our magnetosphere, some of it's coming in, but most of it's streaming around us, it's more that this local fluff is there because something is going on, like even at deeper levels behind the scenes, okay? Why is this local fluff even there? It's not like the central sun of the galaxy is just putting all of this helium and stuff right there at that spot. It's that the edges of this sacred geometry that define where things occur and how energy travels kind of like unseen behind the scenes actually then affects a spot, and then that spot itself is highly energized, and then that spot itself has I don't know whether it literally creates all of the helium and the high temperatures or what, but there's a connection to that. Think of it from the perspective it's behind the scenes. And in the same way, when our solar system enters that spot, even if there wasn't like a whole bunch of local fluff and a whole lot of heat there, it would still affect us in a similar way, because it's an energetic point where energy literally is manifesting, and it's coming through. And again, I'm not, I'm trying to just explain it in the most concise terms rather than going into all the detail of how this all works. So that what the point is, it's not just that we're entering a hot temperature and all of this hot helium and this magnetic atmosphere that's changing stuff that's happening in our sun. Our sun is literally changing at a core level, and our Earth and every other planet in our solar system, because everything is connected, and it's changing at a core level for all of us. Now, it changing our sun at the core level, also then our sun boosts changes within all of the planets within its solar system at a core level. Basically what is happening, you guys, let me just jump to, I'll go back again, but I'm going to jump right into it. This is the shift. This energetic juncture, this specific point that we hit every 25,000 years, and every many cycles above it, if we have other alignments, this is the grand cycle. So we actually have three or four major cycles beyond 25,000 years that only line up right now. Like they weren't there for the last 25,000 years ago. There was no other alignments. It was just the 25,000 year alignment. But now the gears are all lining up. There's at least three major alignments, and that's why this is the end of a grand cycle. 75,000 year cycle. Okay, so we're hitting that. That's the end of the 75,000 year cycle, and that's why it literally is the end of the third dimension. When our Earth came into the 25,000 year cycle 25,000 years ago, it was the second of those three, and so it wasn't the end of third dimension as we know it on Earth. It was a time where the souls and the beings on Earth could have an opportunity to ascend to fourth dimension themselves. And if they did that, they would actually go somewhere else to experience fourth dimension. And 25,000 years before that, another sub-cycle again of the grand 75,000 year cycle, and that was another opportunity. So everything is lining up right now. This is the ascension, this is the shift, because we are entering into this place. Now, the sun being activated by this energy is totally changing, and so now I'm going to go into not only the sun, but the other planets, and some of these are all verified and documented. You can look this up. This is NASA reporting on changes that are taking place. Again, You're not hearing this in the local, in mainstream media or anywhere else. So I'm actually going to end this episode 1, and number 1 of this series, and we'll go into the details of what is actually happening with those planets next. Thanks for watching.